married to somebody, well, there still has to be a spiritual connection between you and that person. And the government at any level doesn't have a dang thing to do with that. And that's why I'm okay with same-sex marriage being recognized by the government. It can and should be. Because that's not actually marriage. We're not talking about marriage. And I take a lot of flack from some of my more conservative, especially some of my more religious friends, because they think I'm betraying the principles here. And I'm not, and I'll explain it. What you're talking about when you're talking about same-sex marriage is you're talking about the state recognizing a civil union. And they've been doing that for a very long time. But in order for the state to recognize that civil union, in order to bestow upon them certain tax incentives or a specific legal status, then it's up to the states to establish what that criteria is. Did you catch that? It's up to the states to establish what that criteria is. Now, the problem here is that at one point in time, the government was never involved in marriage at all. Never should have got involved. But, much like our friends that are arguing that we should erase all remnants of the former Confederacy would like to tell you, it's all about racism. Only in this case, it really is. You know that the very concept of a marriage license drew out of the idea of trying to prevent mixed-race couples from getting married? And, oh yes, by the way, it was the Democrat Party that was pushing that. You know, shh, another dirty little secret. Let's not tell anybody. It's one of those sad, terrible truths. And, of course, you know, I've heard so much in the last few weeks about how, well, the parties switched. No, they didn't. The parties never switched platforms. They never changed ideas. The parties didn't evolve. It's just one party got a lot better at trying to tell you what they thought you wanted to hear, and then tried to paint the other party with every last negative and hurtful and derogatory comment and concept they could think of. That's what changed. Previous to the arrest of Martin Luther King Jr., the majority of black people in America voted Republican because they remembered their history. They knew the truth that the Republican Party was created in an effort, in part, to end slavery. That they supported the civil rights movement. That they opposed Jim Crow laws. That they were, in fact, behind the push for the 14th Amendment in the first place. That's what these marriage licenses came about to be. And it was permitted federally because it was considered a state issue. Because, I mean, the short and simple test is that usually, if it requires a license, then it's a state issue. Now, there are exceptions to that. Yes, I understand, and it's not that simple. And I'm oversimplifying it. I understand all of that, and I admit it freely. But I'm oversimplifying just for the simple fact, simple. Can I say simple 30 more times in the next 30 seconds? For the simple fact that it makes it easier for people to understand. There is a basis here. I'm not upset about the ruling because of what the result was. I'm upset at the ruling because this was the wrong precedent. This was the wrong judgment, and it was based on things incorrectly. And once again, it allows the Supreme Court to tell the federal government that it can overstep its authority, it can ignore states' rights, and therefore it can ignore individual rights. I'm very happy to see a multitude of states very quickly moving to try and protect churches and pastors from possible ramifications of legal actions, which are undoubtedly and unquestionably going to happen if they refuse to officiate over same-sex weddings. But you see, the downside here is that unless the states stand to this and legitimately protect these people, then the first thing that's going to go, and this is going to happen anyway, because the states can try nullification on this. Texas has already said, we're going to follow the law, and we have laws in place, and we have our state constitution in place, and we have defense of marriage, and we have laws in place to protect our pastors. Tennessee immediately moved to and introduced a protection law. Tennessee actually had a law on the books previously in regards to this Confederate flag mania that said, in essence, nobody's allowed to move stuff. We had a Memphis mayor, in case you hadn't heard, wants to move Nathan Bedford Forrest and his wife completely out of the city. He's buried close to black folk. Black folk find that offensive. Well, he's been there for a long time, Mayor. If it was that offensive to them, they might have wanted to bury their people somewhere else. It's insanity. But Tennessee already had a law on the books, and it's going to have to be put in play, that protects the Southern heritage. In essence, we have seen many businesses move quickly because of the fear of the fallout from the public perception. But there are legal protections in place in this state. Now, I would imagine there are probably some other southern states that have similar laws on the books, or will have them soon. There's nothing more irritating to me than to see people dancing in the street over this court decision as if it's settled. Because it's not, boys and girls. I hate to break it to you. This isn't done. You're not going to be able to just force people of faith to go along with you. Barack Obama, the occupier, made a lovely statement, and I got a lot of reaction from this when I shared it on Facebook earlier today, I might add. But he made some statements in regards to how Americans need to shift their religious views to accept gay marriage. In fact, at one point, he said, quote, "Those who disagree with the idea of gay marriage based, for example, on their religious views must change to be more like progressives who accept gay marriage." Barack, sorry, wrong. The Word of God hasn't changed. The teachings haven't changed. Americans who are genuinely people of faith will not change their view because you godless, atheist, heathenistic progressives want a perversion of all that's good. It's not going to happen. Tennessee also made some headlines stirring up its issue with a billboard. Been making the rounds, and folks got really riled up, evidently. Let me pull it up so I can read it to you specifically real quick. The bottom line here is billboard with quotes from Leviticus has generated controversy. Leviticus 18:22. "You shall not lie with a man as with a woman. It is an abomination." And then underneath it says God. On the other page it says, what I've been saying for some time, love the sinner, hate the sin. So understand that this is not about not liking gay people. This is not about not understanding that you're humans and you have dignity. Excuse me. If I hear one more person talk about how they've just been fighting for dignity, I think I might throw up. SC Cup, blathering on CNN about how it's such a wonderful day and beautiful, and she loves her Republican Party, and those of us opposed to this are just dinosaurs, and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, Obama celebrated the decision by having some kind of crazy rainbow-colored display at the White House. Literally changed the lightings outside so that the White House was lit up to look like a rainbow on the night it happened. We've got a link to that also at the Tap Into the Truth Facebook page if you're interested. But here's what's coming. They're going to threaten the 401c status of churches. They're going to do it. We know it's coming. They're going to say whoever doesn't fall in line with this is a bigot. Whoever doesn't fall in line with this is not following the law of the land, because the Supreme Court found that it must be observed in all 50 states. That the 14th Amendment offers equal protection. They're going to say that because they've got that on their side right now. But here comes the simple, honest truth. There is no constitutional right to be married, period. So how on earth can same-sex marriage be constitutionally protected when straight marriage isn't constitutionally protected? What legal grounds do you base that on? It's a farce. It's a red herring. The Constitution doesn't apply. No part of the Constitution applies to this argument because it's not a federal issue. It's not. Show me in the Constitution where straight people have a constitutional right to marriage, and then I will tell you that, yes, even though the 14th Amendment is, in fact, simply a amendment that was designed and meant to prevent people in the South right after the War of Secession had ended from treating freed slaves as if they weren't citizens. That's what it was for. And that's where the concept of equal protection under the law comes from. The idea is that these black folk who used to be slaves, you got to give them the same rights and privileges as any other citizen in your state. That I can get behind. That I agree with. That is true. And I will offer up any and all same protections legally on a state-by-state basis to anybody as the purview and authority goes. If it's a federal issue, then the federal courts should rule. This is not a federal issue because there is no constitutional right to marriage, period. End of discussion. And just FYI, the very arguments used in the decision, the arguments that are actually in the decision itself, can equally apply to polyamory, can equally apply to the polygamous lifestyle. But not just them, it can also equally apply to someone wanting to get involved in a bestiality relationship and decide to get married to their pet. This is an extreme case, but the very argument can be made. And if they want to make this legal precedent, and they are all about precedent, they really, really should have thought this through a little better. It also can apply for a new legal status for marriage in pedophilia. Suddenly, states' wedding age requirements are no longer valid either. Aren't they? Isn't somebody going to argue that? Because now the federal government has established that this isn't actually a state matter, so that invalidates any state regulations on the licensing, doesn't it? I mean, it doesn't immediately, but doesn't it really? Aren't we going to see somebody test those waters? And at some point, how are they going to deny it when they use this very case as their